Welcome to the Reason Roundtable, your weekly libertarian podcast from the magazine of free minds and free markets. I am Matt Welch, sitting in at point guard for a vacationing Peter Suderman, but joined as usual by Nick Gillespie, Katherine Mangu-Ward, and returning special guest star Eric Boehm. Hi, everyone.
Howdy.
Hey, Matt.
Hey.
Before we start officially, a quick note/request. If you're a fan of the Reason Roundtable, and of course you are, we want to hear from you about what you like and what we can do better. So please fill out our little survey, which is right there in the description of this episode. And you can even qualify for a chance at a $300 gift card. Do it today. You'll be glad you did, and so forth. All right, on Friday.
Is that a Cracker Barrel gift card, I hope?
I can only...
Yeah.
A Cracker Barrel gift card with the old logo on it, so it's actually worth more.
My sister, my oldest sister, once worked as a barkeep in a Cracker Barrel in Long Beach, California, or was it Lakewood? At any rate, that is now a McDonald's, and that is the direction of the country is going in. And sorry for it. Let's get to the actual news on Friday in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And why is it always in Jackson Hole, Wyoming? I suppose there's an answer to that, but I don't know it. The embattled Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said, and I quote, "This unusual situation suggests that downside risks to employment are rising. With policy in restrictive territory, the baseline outlook and the shifting balance of risks may warrant adjusting our policy stance." End quote. That seemingly momentous shift in tone sent the equities markets flying high at the end of Friday on the expectation of a previously unforecasted Fed Open Markets Committee rate cut when they meet next in September. It also comes after months and months of jawboning from Donald Trump and his economic advisors, complaining that Powell wasn't moving quickly enough to make money cheaper. Katherine, you edit a magazine that has devoted probably almost as many words about central banking as Pravda has about central planning. What is your sense of the pros and cons of cutting rates?
So I think actually the part of the quote right before what you read is what caught my attention when Powell said, "It's a curious kind of balance that results from a market slowing in both the supply and the demand for workers." That seems bad. I don't know. That doesn't sound great to me. And the fact that all of this discourse is hanging around the Fed rate cuts instead of around other policy decisions. And, of course, the tariffs. And, of course, the fact that Donald Trump is threatening to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook. All of this just seems to come back to me to the long established reason position, which is like, it's not end the Fed period, but it's definitely end the Fed ? So I guess that's where I am.
Eric, we already heard Nick trying to cough tariffs into the conversation.
To manifest them from his throat.
Since you cover the tariffing as much or more than anybody else on staff, what is the Tariffian background to this news?
Yeah, it's interesting that there was this chart going around in like econ Twitter last week that shows investment in the economy and prices, like and inflation, and typically those two things match, or not inflation, but the prices paid by the wholesale level inflation, right? And typically those two things track each other very closely, right? Like when wholesale prices go up, whoop, there comes some more investment. That's supply and demand. That's basic functioning of the economy. And in the last 6 months, they've diverged in a really weird way. Like prices have gone up and investment has gone down. And that's not what's supposed to happen. And the missing middle there is, of course, the consequences of an uncertain and more expensive trade policy and tariffs that are not only on one hand raising prices, but on the other hand punishing investment, or at least giving people who would make those investments reason to say, I'll wait a little bit before I decide what to do. So that's definitely the unspoken part of all this. And then I guess just to sort of double down on what Katherine said, like, look, I don't love the Federal Reserve. I don't really care what happens to Jerome Powell. We should have some sort of like decentralized system for setting interest rates. I don't like this whole thing where like he gets to go to Jackson Hole and just say some words, some nonsense that you read, and like the animal spirits of the stock market take off. I don't love that. But the thing that would be worse than the current thing we have, which is pretty bad, the thing that would be worse than that is like a heavily politicized version of the thing we currently have. And that's the route that we're moving towards. And I don't love that. I also don't love tariffs, obviously. That's where I'm
Nick,
at.
You and I are old enough for everything, certainly to stop caring what other people think about our outward appearance. But beyond that, we've seen presidential pressuring on the Fed in our lifetimes. How does this compare? Or should we be worried not just about trying to bounce Lisa Cook over alleged mortgage fraud or application fraud, but also just kind of transparently trying to stack the 7-member board with 4 Trumpites and so forth? How does that all compare to you?
Yeah, if only she had thought to be a sexual criminal, then none of this would matter, right? Under a second Trump administration. But, to go back to something Katherine was saying, it's like, okay, if we're not going to end the Fed, then we can at least hope that the Fed is independent of the presidency, because you don't want a super politicized money supply going on, either that is just trying to destroy the president or the party in power, or to aid it. There are 2 kind of great examples or lessons from, the past 50 years about this. And the first is a really terrible one, which is Arthur Burns, who was Milton Friedman's mentor as a young economist or as a grad student and whatnot. And Burns, when he became Fed chair under Nixon, did everything that he could to placate Nixon, who wanted low interest rates, and it sparked massive inflation. And Burns, who, when he was named Fed chair, it seemed like, we're finally going to have a person who would be a monetarist, who would understand that the money supply should be, kind of sacrosanct from political influence and should just grow at a kind of normal, natural rate that everybody understands it's not going to be deviated from. It did the exact opposite, and it helped make the 70s one of the most volatile and kind of useless economic decades in terms of the stock market. The flip side of that is somebody like Paul Volcker, who was appointed by Jimmy Carter but came into his own under Ronald Reagan. And what's interesting there is more that Reagan followed Volcker. Volcker was committed to increasing interest rates as a way of breaking the back of the inflation that Arthur Burns and Congress and LBJ and Nixon and Ford and everybody before him had kind of bequeathed onto the nation. And in that sense, they definitely, were winking and nodding to each other at various points, but it was more that the president was doing what was politically very difficult to do, which was putting up with high interest rates and talking about cutting spending and everything to squeeze out inflation. And I fear like if those are the 2 main possibilities, what we're looking at now is a kind of Arthur Burns 2.0. If, in fact, Powell or if the Fed starts going along with Trump's whims, that will be terrible. It will be actually terrible, absolutely terrible for the country, but it will also not be a difference in kind. It will be a difference in degree. There is a very strong argument that, we've essentially had an expansionary Fed going back to, right after Reagan left office, whether it was Greenspan or the Ben Bernanke or anybody else. Interest rates have been kept pretty low, lower than they probably would have been otherwise. We've had massive printing of money and things like that. So if Trump gets what he wants, it will almost certainly be bad for the economy. And ultimately, and maybe this is the thing that might restrain him, bad for Republicans as well.
Can I just thank Nick for reminding us all of those weird little videos with the Ben Bernanke in them? Do you guys remember those with like the
bears,
the animated rabbits or whatever? Yeah. Just want our listeners to go seek those out if they have not seen them.
Well, that's also just a real. It's funny because I was like, "Am I going to remember his name?" And the Fed chair is really important, and like you forget about them very quickly because they, they are like like Obama and Homer Simpson. They kind of fade back into the vegetative wall, right?
The vegetative wall.
The vegetative wall. That's right.
That's where I want to go to.
It's
Yes,
happy
Matt.
in the vegetative wall.
But I want to touch on something that Nick just said, or explore a little bit further. It's like, if we can't end the Fed, we might as well have it independent. And this isn't picking on Nick. That'll come later. But isn't that in our kind of low trust, high hubristic, high punitive era of politics, where whoever now runs the executive branch is just swinging it like a club? Isn't the sort of, well, at least let's have the independent agencies be independent kind of thing, fighting, yesterday's wars? It's not reflective of a pragmatic approach to our fallen times that we live in, where no one can trust anything, and wherever there is a seemingly independent, seemingly above it all institution, it of course is going to be receiving all of the pressure of nationalized politics to warp in the direction of whatever team controls the executive branch.
I have to say that is dark as shit for a beautiful sunny Monday. Like, wow. Yeah, you're not wrong. I think that actually this is a very classic, you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of situation. Like, each independent thing falls, and then we look back and say oh, wow, we really took for granted how it was sort of valuable to have that thing be independent, even though it was imperfect. And so it's probably true that it's over for the Fed, or maybe it was over a while ago. It's the most painful, most agonizing thing that I can say on this podcast, which is Elizabeth Warren is right about this. She tweeted, "Anyone can see he, Donald Trump, is trying to find a scapegoat for his failure to lower costs for Americans," talking about his attempts to fire Lisa Cook. The president has had the power to fire Fed governors for 100 years for cause, and has never actually done it, I don't think. That feels like a line that we might end up crossing that will be, we can't go back to it. We can't be oh, and now a new president comes in and restores my norms. Biden didn't do it, and there's no reason to expect that whoever comes after Trump will do it. And as long as it rests on the goodwill of the executive to follow the unspoken rules, we're just not seeing executives willing to do that.
Speaking of things that we took for granted that went away, for 75 years, there was a Washington-led consensus that it would be a good idea if its trading partners in Western Europe, and specifically, and that has since expanded a little bit to the east, would have lower tariffs, because then they would be the rich free world compared to the bad, evil commie world, and it would be easier to fight the evil commies. Anyways, that's all over. And last Thursday, the EU negotiators from the EU and the US announced that they agreed on the shape of a trade deal or something to that effect. Eric, if you could walk us through what was actually agreed to here, and more importantly, what this might portend, what this looks like for international tariff rates, given that the most, I think, important trading relationship, or at least the most sizable trading relationship in the world, is that between the United States and the European Union.
Yeah, I think this this serves to more or less lock in the Trump administration's 15% global tariff. It sets the expectation that that's more or less where we're going to be, even with our friends and allies. And then we'll have higher tariffs for the people that we don't like, because that's more or less what was agreed to here. So the two sides in this, the framework of this deal, and there was actually, unlike most of these other deals that the Trump administration has announced, there was actually something in writing put down here. So that's a step in the right direction, even though it's a very basic one. But the European Union said that it will work to eliminate all tariffs on industrial goods and goods on farm items, things like that, from the United States. And in return for that, the United States will eliminate all of its tariffs. Oh, no, just kidding. In return for that, the United States will keep the 15% tariff that Trump decided to put in place a few months ago, but we will promise not to raise any other tariffs higher than 15%. So Europe was understandably quite concerned about the possibility of some very big tariffs tariffs on pharmaceuticals. A lot of our pharmaceuticals come from Europe. There's a lot of pharmaceutical companies based in various places in Europe, the Netherlands and Germany, places like that. And there's the possibility the Trump administration hasn't gone down this road yet, but they keep hinting at the fact that there might be some very big tariffs on pharmaceuticals coming. So this is a handshake deal, basically, where the U.S. says, okay, 15% tariffs are here to stay, but we won't go any higher than that on any particular products. It remains to be seen whether that actually happens because of two factors that I think are really worth considering here. First is Trump has couched this entire trade policy, his entire agenda, in this idea that these things are reciprocal, right? That we're going to charge them what they charge us. That was the line that he used over and over again from January all the way through his address to Congress in March, all the way through that April 2nd Liberation Day announcement. They've more or less stopped talking about that now. And the reason is that it's obviously not reciprocal, right? Like, look at what I just talked about is in this deal, right? Europe says we'll get rid of all of our tariffs, and the United States says 15% tariffs. That's not reciprocal. European tariffs on American goods, even before all this happened, were lower than the average American tariff on imports from Europe. So things were not reciprocal then. I think this is not moving us towards a world of more reciprocity. It's actually taking us away from that. So that's nonsense. The other thing is, and this is something that I've been meaning to write for us at Reason at some point, and I will get around to it at some point, is to point out that these deals, most of which are not even as formalized as this one was, because there's nothing written down with the Japan deal, for example. Howard Lutnick gave an interview last week where he said that there may never be anything in writing in that deal. So it really is just a verbal agreement between the leaders of two countries. The reason why trade deals are hundreds of pages long and incredibly boring and technical is that you try to work out every possible thing, because there really is nobody you can appeal to, right, on the international stage. So you kind of have to work everything out and make sure that everybody has all their ducks in a row. And then you go forward with the assumption that everybody benefits from lower tariffs. These deals seem to be serving two purposes. First, they seem to be locking in the higher tariffs that Trump wants now, and they seem to be creating so much uncertainty because there are no details, so much uncertainty that the Trump administration or some future administration could come back and just decide that they're going to change the deal at some future time because there is no actual agreement. And so it creates the possibility, it creates higher tariffs now, and I think it creates the possibility for higher tariffs in the future when and if Trump wants them. And of course, we know even the seriously negotiated deals, he doesn't feel as strong, he doesn't really feel strongly constrained by those. He blew up his own U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement from his first term. So, I don't know. You should take all of these deals with a lot of grains of salt. This does seem like it creates at least the possibility that we won't see, a bigger trade war, or a broader trade war between the United States and Europe, and that's good news. But this deal itself is still, I don't know. It creates higher tariffs. It creates higher costs for Americans, obviously, and I don't think it gets us towards any sort of reciprocity.
Katherine, Libertarian, especially of the economic variety, like to talk about the difference between that which is seen and that which is unseen. So what is unseen in a world of this kind of tariff increasing and deal making?
I think the biggest unseen is the uncertainty, right? The fact that, as Eric says, this isn't written down, it doesn't have the traditional form with all the details hammered out. It means that major players and small players in the market who could be using their time, energy, and money to think of cool new products or cool new ways to deliver those products or cool new ways to market those products will instead just be burning calories to play defense against the downside political risk that they're facing. They will just always be being careful to not screw up by breaking the rules that are written down nowhere that no one knows that Donald Trump has in his mind. And that's a horrible use of the energy of our best and brightest commercial minds. So I think that's the biggest unseen. The other thing I want to point out is just the cover story of the new issue of Reason magazine, which is out this week, is about why Europe is much, much poorer than the United States. It is about the Euro poors. And first of all, it's bad to pick on somebody who's weaker than you, which is what we are doing with Europe. Like, that's rude. And also, this kind of thing is why Europe is poor, because it is so heavily because there's so much regulation, because so much of the energy of the European economy is built around dealing with political problems. You get the fact that in Western Europe, the GDP per capita is $63,000 per year, adjusted for cost of living. In the United States, it's 86. Like, we're a lot richer than they are. And it's not just like, oh, lol, they don't have air conditioning. Although, like, lol, they don't have air conditioning. But, that means all these things for us that are awesome. And this type of international economic behavior is going to force us to behave more like Europeans and probably be poorer as a consequence.
Nick, I think it was you referenced Cracker Barrel earlier on this podcast.
Yes, I did, Matt.
I'm pretty sure it's a long time ago. And
why aren't we filming this at a Cracker Barrel? Why didn't we go on location this week?
Matt might be in a Cracker Barrel.
Maybe.
I
like it does kind of look like that. And he's playing the golf tee game. What's called
Nick
the Cracker Barrel
cool
peg
boomer
game.
Cracker Barrel, but it's still kind of Cracker Barrel-y back there too.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Cracker Barrel was not interested in the human being, as this poster kind of advertises. They were anti that.
I'm so sorry.
That Cracker Barrel is where the guys who shot the two protagonists of Easy Rider went to afterwards.
Oh,
to have a meal and talk about how good things were going.
I have at least one friend who wouldn't go to a French friend who wouldn't go to the American South for like decades because he was afraid he was going to get shot by people for being
because Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper had a negative impression of the American South.
I think that's true. Anyways, Nick.
Sure.
So it seems to me, at least according to my Twitter feed, but I think I'm going to close down Twitter because that's just bad and replace it all with RSS feeds, as I learned last week. But that conservative people on the right were more excited about talking about Cracker Barrel than they were in talking about, I don't know, across the board gigantic tariff increase with the European Union that reshapes the global economy. What does that say about the state of modern conservative intellectual discourse, if anything?
Yeah, it's pretty sad, to say the least. And the funniest thing, I was thinking about all of this tariff stuff, and Eric touched on this, the average tariff rate of stuff coming into the U.S. from Europe before all of this was like 2 to 3%. And there's certain carve-outs which still exist. So now Trump is like, I made a great deal where instead of you guys paying, like Americans paying on shit that shows up, that washes up from European shores into America, instead of paying 2 or 3%, you get to pay 15%. What a good deal. I mean, it's like, it's like an Abbott and Costello routine or something where they start negotiating with somebody and they end up with a really shitty deal. And they're like, all right, it's stunning. I mean, it is. And other
Nick,
things
think about all the
changed.
money that the U.S. Treasury is getting. This is the thing they've
I
pivoted to now, right? They've pivoted to talking about, look at all the money we're bringing in as their talking point, which is
where
staggering.
tariffs will go from making up 2 to 3% of federal revenue to maybe 5%. So it's like, oh, this is a real game changer. We can get rid of all of the extra taxes and, just spend it on, making American flags in America, not flame retardant flags or something. None of it makes any sense whatsoever, and the shifting justification, because you're also not hearing them talk about how, remember, because the big thing about tariffs was not only was it going, we were going to force China to pay for everything in America by levying tariffs on their goods coming in that are paid for by American consumers and producers. It was going to bring manufacturing back, and you don't hear that much, being yammered on about anymore. Because it's not like American cheese production is going to go up gigantically, because of, that we'll be paying more for European cheese.
Eric, you've written a little bit about how some of the initial tariffs that were supposed to do X are now covering Y, Z, and then back to A, B, C, and D, including on American manufacturers. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of initially unadvertised effects of tariffs on American manufacturing that we're experiencing right now?
Yes, I think probably two things that you're alluding to there. One is that, as Nick said, the promise of this tariff regime was that, it's going to bring manufacturing back. Well, it turns out that we import a lot of stuff that goes into manufacturing, right? So something
who could have known that?
Who could have guessed?
They had no way of knowing.
You just had to look at the data, but that's boring, and it's that's what you got to do. But something like 50% of all imports go into our manufacturing inputs or raw materials or intermediate goods of some sort. So obviously the tariffs are making those things more expensive, which then makes manufacturing more expensive. So it means that even making stuff here in the U.S. is now turning out to be more expensive. We're also, of course, when tariffs raise the price, economists could have told you this, and did tell the Trump administration this months ago. When tariffs raise the price of foreign goods, it means that domestic producers can raise their prices too because they now face less competition. So for a combination of those two reasons, you're now seeing domestic-made items become more expensive too. That's foreign goods have become more expensive more recently, but so have domestic produced goods. You're also seeing this weird expansion of definitions of what falls under tariffs. I wrote about this last week. This was done really quietly, but the Trump administration just added 400 new items to the steel and aluminum tariffs. There are now 400 more things based on their little eight-digit import code that everything that comes into the country fits into one of these little 8-digit codes. There are now 407 more of those that will have this 50% steel and aluminum tariff applied to them because they are considered derivative goods of steel or aluminum, even though they're plainly not derivative goods. It's like milk, for example. If it comes into the country in an aluminum or steel container, as much of it does, hey, that aluminum and steel is now subject to tariff, even though that is not competing with American aluminum steel in any meaningful way, but that's now going to be subject to tariff.
They're just imposing tariffs now on things that are kind of shiny.
Yeah, that's literally the one quote in the piece was a economist who said this. Anything that's sort of shiny or metallic or looks like it might be is now subject to tariffs, is more or less how it goes. And actually it gets even worse than that because they've also set up a process where 3 times a year the Department of Commerce will allow any business that wants to come in and say, hey, we think you should put tariffs on this thing because this thing is somehow derivative of steel or aluminum. So they've created an obviously cronyist process here to allow for American companies or any company to apply for additional tariffs on their competitors based on, some really stupid understanding of what might count as a derivative product of steel or aluminum. So, it continues to expand. And this is these are all things that economists knew. None of this is new information to anybody who has studied this stuff for hundreds of years. But, tariffs are bad not only because of the immediate effects, the cost increases that happen, but because of the unseen stuff like Katherine was just talking about. I mean, they have consequences and they tend to be really sticky because they create political incentives for people to lobby for more tariffs or for carve-outs for this thing or for exceptions for that thing that obviously makes lobbyists and trade lawyers in Washington, D.C. quite wealthy, but probably isn't going to do a lot for, the guys in the Rust Belt diner.
One of the Reason cover stories that we did that I loved that absolutely no one else enjoyed at all, it was not exactly a traffic hit, was a cover story on there was just a hit piece on the Department of Commerce. And I get it. I get why people might have been like, oh, this isn't what I want in my Monday feed. But more relevant now than ever because a lot of what happens in that building is this garbage that Eric is describing. Sonny Bunch wrote that for us. We randomly commissioned. We're like, hey, do you hate the Department of Commerce? Let's just write a piece about that. I still think it was a good idea.
This is all part of the march towards state capitalism, which we tend to talk about more when Trump is telling people if you want, and I mean this you have to give them it's innovative. Typically, it's when a ship shows up at a dock, and it's like if you want to get goods off it, you have to pay a mobster. He's saying if you want if you want your ship laden with your goods to leave the harbor, you got to pay us off. But with things like the Intel and NVIDIA deals and stuff like that, which are just gangsterism, this is part of state capitalism, where it's like you're starting to say everything that comes in and out of my kingdom, you need to be checking with me if I like it, if I like you. I'm going to let you go easy this day. I'm not going to make you empty your pockets, but, think of me around Christmas time or something. This is like, these types of mini controls and death by 1,000 cuts or 1,000 tariffs and levies and approvals on things coming in and out of the country. I mean, it's terrible, it's awful, and it needs to be rebutted. Unfortunately, in the contemporary or in the current political discourse, part of the problem is Republicans who, 5, 10, 15 years ago certainly would have been crying bloody murder if a Democrat was doing this, are now, leading the way and beating the bushes. And, they are, the paramilitary groups on Twitter who are going out and clubbing people. And the Democrats are stuck in a weird place. You mentioned Elizabeth Warren earlier, Matt. Nothing that Trump is doing is something that Elizabeth Warren would be like, oh, that is, horrible and anti-American. She really seems to be kind of pissed that she's not the one who is making the call, because she's obviously, very smart and has both the ancient wisdom of a Native American plus, the experience of working at Rutgers, one of the greatest universities in America, and then, taking it easy for the last 100 years at Harvard.
Katherine, let's close this out in a kind of similar way that Nick Gillespie at the apex of his career, when he was writing for like teen rock magazines, would close out every interview of like, message to the fans. So let's do that with you, except message to the Heritage Foundation and Stephen Moore.
Can I have Nick ghostwrite this for me as
really
Alyssa Milano? I'll do it myself.
To broaden it out, there is, as Nick was alluding to, a superstructure of Republicans who spent decades talking about how state capitalism is bad, and Bernie Sanders' ideas are not worth emulating. Bernie, by the way, is a big fan of the U.S. taking 10% stakes in random technology.
Yeah, his idea originally.
Shockingly enough. Yeah. And some of those very same people are now shoulder to shoulder with the president of the United States as he gets very excited, not just about tariffs, but about like bragging on all this tariff revenue. Katherine.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is I hate to say that just pointing at Bernie Sanders and being like, remember when you hated him? He likes this. Any conclusions? Like, that shouldn't be the way that we do our political arguing. But I think that probably is the way that stands the most chance of being effective. Like, people feel uncomfortable when they realize that they are in the kind of closing sides of the horseshoe. They don't like it, and they shouldn't like it, because it's taking us to bad places for the most part. And so I do think the message to people who are suddenly pro-tariff and suddenly pro-cronyism in like a very, very naked way is look around you and see who else thinks this is a good idea. Like, the argument from like the ad hominem argument is the one that is most likely to be effective here. And I hate that for us.
All right, we're going to get to our listener email of the week here in a moment. But first, a word from our sponsors over at BetterHelp. Friends, do you ever get so overwhelmed, not just by the demands of the modern world, but by the diner-length menu of proposed fixes? The wellness centers, the body cleanses, the screen detoxes, and that's just within like a 1 mile radius of where I'm recording this in the Hudson Valley. It can be hard to figure out where to even start, but I can tell you from my own personal experience that sometimes talking to an actual human professional can help you break through the clutter. That's where BetterHelp online therapy comes in. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with more than 30,000 therapists serving over 5 million people so far. Be the 5 million and second. And you can see why. Just arrange a session at the click of a button and switch out to a new therapist at any time. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Roundtable listeners get 10% off their first month by visiting betterhelp.com/roundtable. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/roundtable. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. All right, reminder to send your terse queries to roundtable@reason.com. This one comes from beloved listener Molly Brown, resident of the Chicago suburbs, which will come into play. She writes, what do you think of Rahm Emanuel as a presidential candidate? I usually vote for Libertarians or Republicans, but I'm surprisingly excited about this idea. He seems tough, smart, savvy, and sensically moderate. I love the word sensically. Curious to hear your thoughts, Molly. Nick, are you feeling the Rahm-mentum?
Rahm-mentum or a manumentum? I don't know. No, not at all. He was a bully and a failure as mayor of Chicago. I think C.J. Ciaramella wrote about him and the way that he went out of his way to hide incriminating evidence or to block FOIA requests, the equivalent of FOIA requests about Chicago cops and things like that. He tried to, early on, kind of like Andrew Cuomo, when he was getting elected, he said a lot of good things, including about really going after the Chicago teachers unions and kind of trying to create schools as places that are, care about children rather than teachers and pensions. And he failed completely in all of that. The one thing I will say that is indicative of what he might try to do if he becomes president of America, which seems highly unlikely in any case, he at one point floated the idea of legalizing weed and gambling in Chicago and then having the city run it. And basically, that's how they would make money. And at one point, he also said, you know what, because when he was mayor, interest rates were low. Let's sell a shit ton of bonds and then invest it in the stock market. And as long as we're outperforming our interest, we'll be able to pay things off. And it's like, all right, I kind of like that go for broke spirit. And Chicago is obviously the largest, most failed city in America. So I'm a hard no on Rahm. And I also hate the Chicago Cubs.
Wow. Katherine, you like the White Sox because of Pope Bob. Obviously, what do you think about Rahm Emanuel?
I don't know what any of those words meant. He is the original sayer of the phrase that has characterized our politics for far too long, which is never let a serious crisis go to waste. This is Rahm Emanuel's MO. And he actually, I looked the quote up because I wanted to be sure that it was really him. There's a second sentence, which I hadn't remembered, where he clarifies and he says, and what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before.
So he didn't walk it back. He actually was like, I mean exactly that.
Clear. I mean, in crisis, violate the will of the people further because you can. He was not leaving that up to chance, up to any kind of ambiguity. This is not the person we want to run the country. This is maybe the person we have running the country. This philosophy guides many politicians, but Rahm Emanuel said the quiet part loud, and that is not to be admired.
Didn't Eric, he also get in the congressional locker rooms? He would be snapping towels and putting Paul Ryan into chokeholds and stuff like that.
He absolutely does seem like the guy that would get out of the shower and just walk around naked. I do. Yeah, and
aggressively. And thankfully back then the congressional locker rooms were all single sex spaces. I don't know what that's like now. And God bless Nancy Mace. And trying to keep the locker room single sex.
She just wants to keep Rahm Emanuel out of there. That's really what she's trying to do.
I think so.
Eric, a message to Rahm Emanuel fans?
I was also going to reference that C.J. Ciaramella piece from this is from 2019, and it's really terrific. People should look it up and read the whole thing. Primarily concerned with, at that point, the fact that he was trying to and had succeeded for a while in keeping hidden the video dash cam footage of the fatal police shooting of 17-year-old Lachlan McDonald in 2014. But CJ in there tallies up a whole bunch of really terrific examples of just anti-transparency, anti-First Amendment actions by Emanuel when he was mayor of Chicago. I guess, mayors of all big cities do this. Ultimately, the number that the piece tallies up to is over $1 million in taxpayer costs that had to be paid out in public records lawsuits while he was there. So that's not great. But look, I would also say, I think it's the Democrats could do a lot worse than Rahm Emanuel. It is entirely possible that they will do much worse than Rahm Emanuel. So look, I wouldn't vote for him, but I don't really vote that often anyway. anyway, Katherine doesn't vote at all. He's not going to get a lot of support here, but they could do a lot worse. And I guess, I don't know. He did take on he said some good things, has said a lot of good things over the years about the need to take on teachers unions. And I think that's a thing that Democrats urgently need to confront, is that problem within their ranks and the weight that special interest in particular holds. So there's some role for him, I think, in whatever the future of the Democratic Party looks like. I don't know if presidential candidate is really the right one, but they could do worse.
God, are we going to really be looking at just Rahm Emanuel versus Gavin Newsom? Is that
versus Gavin Newsom's memes?
Versus Gavin Newsom's memes versus the ghost of Kamala Harris?
I guess also just
Gretchen
politically,
Whitmer,
right?
There's a strangler's row of struggler, of
the fact that you
great
can hang
Democrats
Chicago
waiting
around his neck the same way you can hang California around Newsom's neck, just creates a political problem. Aside from the policy
fourth largest economy in the world. What are you talking about? It's just
very difficult, I think, to convince.
He's got great weather. He can bring that weather everywhere. I want to join the Gavin Newsom campaign.
A middle America Fox News viewer is going to have a difficult time voting for Rahm. If your strategy as the Democratic Party is to get people to vote for you who would otherwise vote Republican, which is what the strategy should be, right?
That doesn't sound
that sounds like the
strategy.
How we
win election?
Then I think you got to go with a candidate that can't be so easily caricatured as California or Chicago. You got to find somebody I don't know, the governor of a successful, cool state with some mountains in it. Mm-hmm. I would go more down that avenue if I was the Democratic Party.
Mountains.
New Jersey.
Yes. New Jersey, obviously, yes.
I would add the teachers unions thing is kind of an interesting way of looking at all of this, which is to say the Democratic Party as a professional apparatus has been so captured, and so recently, by that over the last 11, 12 years. There used to be space, including the Obama administration. Obama appointed a Chicago guy, Arnie Duncan, to be his Secretary of Education, and did race to the top and all of this. There was room in the Democratic Party for being pro-charter schools, being in favor of innovation and all of this. And that stopped on a dime. And not just stopped, but anyone with any pretense of wanting a future, especially a presidential future, the Democratic Party, had to renounce their previous support of such things. So Cory Booker, who used to be very interesting on that front, is no longer interesting on that front because he's interested in taking his diaper all the way to the White House. and this is indicative of kind of a problem. I think, without peering too closely into Molly's brain here, but part of the contemporary appeal of a Rahm Emanuel idea is that he seems like a blunt talking guy who can tell Democrats come on, knock it off. And there's always an inherent appeal, especially to those of us who are not Democrats, of that. So, why doesn't James Carville run for president? Why doesn't Bill Maher run for president? Or even John Fetterman, if you like that kind of thing. And we know that Nick does. And I think that oversells by a whole lot where the actual beating heart of actual Democrats are. If you are, even if you have that predilection, if you're hitting your own side, even 5% of the time or 10% of the time, unless you're hitting them in a direction like Zoran Mamdani does, which is to say, I'm hitting us for being too neoliberal and too centrist, then you're not going to catch fire at all. And James Carville hasn't won an election in about 5,000 years. For a reason. This is not where
he's the Gene Mock of Democratic campaign managers at this point, Matt.
Minus
well below 500 career. Yeah.
But yes, I will take no Gene Mock trash talking on this podcast, as we've gone over in the past. All right. On Friday, the FBI raided the home of former National Security Advisor John Bolton, allegedly over the possibly improper handling of classified documents. Bolton had previously warned in advance of the second Trump presidency, and keep in mind, he worked in the first, that Trump 2.0 would be the retribution presidency. So a lot of people are looking at this as evidence of that. On the other hand, a lot of people are saying, ha ha, John Bolton, mustache, and neocons. And then there's plenty of other reactions besides. Katherine, where do you look at this raid? Do you see so far in the reporting of it evidence to support that the story that looks like, actionable, probably, possibly illegal handling of classified documents that deserves an FBI raid, or does this look more political to you?
On Reddit, when they have those "Am I the asshole?" boards, like those questions, and there's a code that's like you reply with a code like "You're the asshole," whatever, and one of them is just like everyone's an asshole, and like that is what if like first of all, a million reasons to hate Bolton, just a million bazillion reasons to hate him and think that he has probably done illegal things, if not sloppy things with classified documents. But again, everyone's the asshole here. Every single person involved in this case has done sloppy things with classified documents. Do we remember the Mar-a-Lago bathroom? Do we remember any of that? So every single person is mishandling their classified documents. Maybe we shouldn't have so many classified documents. Maybe we shouldn't let idiots have access to classified documents. Lots of options here, but we didn't take them, and now here we are. The attempts to do prior restraint on Bolton's book, which everyone keeps saying this is not about the book, but it's definitely about the book. I love the quote where his lawyer came back about they tried to prevent the publication of the book because of classified secrets in it. The lawyer wrote back just like, we do not believe there are classified secrets in this book. We're going to publish it. And they did. Everyone's mad about that. I totally get it. But then Bolton is like far from the only person being mistreated in this way, right? This is like every single person who either personally or categorically runs afoul of Trump. So either like you personally annoyed him, or like you're an immigrant and so your category annoys him, or you're certain types of immigrant. You are facing like infinite jeopardy. Like we're not even in double jeopardy anymore. Like it's just, there are so many paths to come after people who are disfavored. Bolton's case is photogenic. The mustache, he's on TV a lot, but this is happening to dozens and dozens and dozens of people, probably like right there in Maryland. Like his neighbors are also just getting hauled off for being Venezuelan or whatever. And we should maybe pay more attention to those stories. Everyone's the asshole is my conclusion.
Nick, I see some of the defense.
I think you're the asshole, Matt. I'm sorry. Are we still on Bolton? Or?
If we're talking about seen and unseen, I think we see that,
yeah.
Nick. So it's not really, doesn't need a lot of elucidation here. Some of the defense, or at least the anti-objection to this is like, hey, look, did you guys miss the whole Biden presidency when they threw absolutely everything possible at Donald Trump? This is just an extension of all of that. Do those people have a point?
And I think the only way to get back at the Biden administration is by going after John Bolton, obviously. This is but to go. The first order of business is to remember that in his fascinating book, Government Gangsters, Kash Patel had John Bolton in the appendix that is widely referred to as, Kash Patel's enemies list. He's a member of the deep state, and he needs, he's guilty of war crimes and needs to be prosecuted. So, there's obviously there is a heavy political payback pretext to all of this, which is deeply disturbing. And when you look at, the fact that we know that Bolton had Iranian assassins on his tail, and Trump was like, you don't get a security detail after you leave office because, you made me look bad, this type of thing. So, there's a heavy political pretext that we should take seriously because Trump is gangsterish and he does do payback, and this is awful. He officially has said he knew nothing about this before it happened, and, his plausible deniability on that. On the other hand, it's also true from what I've read that the FBI actually had to get warrants for his arrest, and they went after his office in D.C. as well as his house in Bethesda, which where, ironically, J. Edgar Hoover used to live. And J. Edgar Hoover, this was my favorite tidbit about J. Edgar Hoover in Bethesda, in a Ralph Di Toledano book that was an attempt to, right after J. Edgar Hoover died, was to like kind of plump him up and say it wasn't all bad. He mentioned in passing that J. Edgar Hoover hated cutting his grass. Him and Clyde Tolson, they had a little yard, but they hated cutting it, and they put in AstroTurf. And like, If I was living next to the head of the FBI in like the 1960s, and it's like this guy is putting in AstroTurf, I would be like, move to Russia now. But in any case, the fact that they got warrants does not mean, of course, that he's guilty at all, because people, get warrants served against them who are totally innocent and whatnot. But there is at least a legal process that is in place here. And I hope that it plays out in public and that this isn't just the type of thing which happens. And this is the real power of the government, not to actually prosecute and put people in jail, but to just prosecute them and drain them of money and get that first big, barrage of news stories saying John Bolton, arrested, John Bolton, blah, 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 or, charged with, or not even charged, but just we're inspecting his house, we're going to do all that, and then it just fades away into nothingness. You can break people, and to Catherine's point, it's not just John Bolton can kind of take care of himself. It's all of the smaller people, lower down in various kinds of places. And this, can be from a Democratic administration or a Republican one. But so it's deeply disturbing, but it also so far seems to at least be following a legal process.
Eric, message to Kash Patel's fans.
I have very little sympathy for John Bolton. I think similar to what Katherine and Nick said, I don't know whether he should be prosecuted. I think Nick's right. It's a process we should let play out. In fact, hold that thought for just a second, because I'll come back to it. You know what would have solved this, though, is that what should have happened years ago is John Bolton should have faced absolute and permanent social sanction for the role he played during the Bush years. He should not have continued to be invited on CNN. He shouldn't have been given book deals. He should have been effectively banished from Washington. He should not have been taken seriously as a foreign policy thinker or intellectual or conservative or neocon or whatever label you want to apply to him. He was largely responsible for the biggest foreign policy screw up of a generation, and he never was punished for that. And if he had been punished for that via social sanction, if he had just been told, go away, John, we don't want to hear from you anymore, then none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been part of the Trump administration. He wouldn't have gotten this book. He wouldn't be we could have solved this whole problem by dealing with John Bolton the way we should have dealt with John Bolton a long time ago. And that
was by inviting him on the Fifth Column podcast, correct?
I know
did
some
you
of you have
sanction
better
him on
feelings
the
towards
Fifth
him.
Column, or
no,
did
he
you
shouldn't have been invited on the Fifth
to
Column.
him?
I'm very sorry, but he does not deserve to be granted any sort of status because he sucks, and whether he's done illegal acts or not, he's certainly done immoral ones. And then I'm also thinking on that point,
veto power that the Reason Roundtable has.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about how once he called for Chelsea Manning to face the death penalty for leaking classified documents. This is a real thing. We can put it in the show notes for people because more people should be aware of this. It was in a 2012 BBC film about WikiLeaks. He was interviewed for it, and he said that Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And then when asked to clarify what that would mean, he responded, death. So, I don't know whether he should be prosecuted with this. I think it's all kind of gross and dumb. But if the shoe was on the other foot, I have no doubt that Bolton would believe that the target of this investigation should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So if he gets held to his own standards here, I have no sympathy for him whatsoever.
This just in, Eric Boehm now in favor of the death penalty. I wanted to hit just because it broke a second before we started recording here of news that President Donald Trump, unusually for him, is going to sign an executive order today. That's sarcasm.
Yeah.
He signs a lot of them. And this one is somehow going to bolster the penalties or make it harder or frown and wag a finger really hard. I haven't seen the wording yet. Hopefully it's all of the above. Hopefully not actually. To get mad at people who harm the American flag. I want everyone to say exactly one sentence about why, even though we don't know what's in that executive order, that's a bad idea. Nick, go.
I want to burn all the imported Chinese American flags made in China, and then we can have this conversation.
Thank you. Katherine?
Trump once said that anyone who burns a flag should go to jail for 1 year, just automatic.
Eric, message to Donald Trump.
There's something really poetic about the fact that F.I.R.E will inevitably get this struck down in court. Yeah. So that's my take.
Well done all around is my sentence. All right, let's go to our end of podcast, what we've all been consuming in the cultural arena, sphere, and whatnot. Eric Boehm, why don't you lead us off?
So I watched Palm Springs, which is a 2020 romantic comedy with Andy Samberg and Kristen Milotti. And man, it is delightful. Like 10 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10. Wow. I think the ending is like a little too quick and easy. But really terrific movie. It's a riff on Groundhog Day. Most people listening to this probably saw it when it came out because it was really popular. I just finally caught up to it this weekend.
And it was cited by me at the very least, recommended on this podcast.
Oh, really? I did a search and I did not see it. So I apologize. Then just go back and look at what Nick talked about. No, I mean, it's a riff on Groundhog Day, and Samberg is a guest at a wedding. He accidentally gets stuck in a time loop and, has to relive the same day over and over again. I won't give away any spoilers, but like everything I'm going to say happens in the first 15 minutes. So none of these things are spoilers. But the thing that makes this really different
5 years old. You can give a spoiler.
From other time loop stories.
The statute of limitations.
The reason why this is different is that it's not just him. It's not just like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day stuck in this time loop. He ends up actually stuck in this loop with 2 other people too. And it creates this interesting dynamic that I was thinking about for the rest of the weekend, where it's sort of about different ways of dealing with the meaninglessness of life, right? Which is obviously essential to any of these like time loop stories. Catherine's a big fan of Stargate, and Stargate does an amazing episode with a time loop also.
So good.
But it's fundamentally existentialist story, and you've got Samberg kind of is already deep in the time loop when the movie starts, which is another interesting and clever device that the movie uses, so you don't have to watch him get trapped in it. And he's in like a really dark nihilistic place, like there is no meaning, there is no God, nothing we do matters. There's no purpose to this existence. And then the 2 other characters that end up stuck in there with him, one of them has a much more like existentialist experience of like trying desperately to find meaning in the meaninglessness, even if that means doing terrible things. And like that character does some really terrible things, and then ultimately finds that like there's actually better ways to search for meaning in meaninglessness. And that's an interesting little subplot. And then Kristen Milotti, who is the mother from How I Met Your Mother, and she's been recently has gotten a lot of praise for her role in Penguin, which is on HBO, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to go watch now specifically because she was so delightful in Palm Springs. And she has a much more like it's an absurdist interpretation of the meaninglessness of the time loop. And it's that the play between kind of Andy Samberg, who's trapped in this sort of funny but nihilistic mentality, and her kind of the absurdist quality that she brings to it in the whole second act of the movie, where they're just sort of living the same day over and over again, is really quite wonderful because of the interplay between those kind of 2 perspectives on this, like, well, what if existence is totally meaningless? How do you respond to that? Anyway, really delightful movie. Also, I've been an Andy Samberg fan for a long time, so I was really remiss to have not seen this for a long time. So I'll throw in one additional thing. If you've got like 30 minutes to spare sometime this week, go on YouTube and look up the 2005 pilot episode for a show called Awesome Town. It was a sketch comedy show that Samberg and his 2 friends put together to pitch to Fox right before they got hired by SNL. He got hired to be on the show. His 2 friends got hired as writers. And it is terrific, and also like just great absurdist kind of early day Lonely Island humor, and really truly wonderful. Also, one additional fun fact about Palm Springs that I looked up. Sorry. The 2 people who wrote and directed this movie, this was the first feature film they had written and directed together, because I was like, who wrote this? What else have they done? I want to see more things. And so
Bolton.
Anyway, go like write that screenplay that you've been thinking about, man, because it might be as good as this. Palm Springs. It was delightful.
I think I wrote an entire screenplay during your description.
Sorry.
He was right. Every word was correct.
Every word was correct. Catherine, what did you consume?
I read Ina Garten's memoir. Listen, I don't know. I was sort of on vacation, and this is what I did. So it's called Be Ready When Luck Happens. She is, of course, the Barefoot Contessa, one of the very, very early cooking show personalities. So Julia Child, of course, the OG, but Ina Garten, her whole deal is like kind of home entertaining, but she had a specialty food store in the Hamptons. And so a lot of her stuff comes out of that. What you may not know about her is that she used to, in her previous incarnation, in her previous career, worked in Washington, D.C. She and her husband, Jeffrey, who's a frequent character on the show, for those who know, they were government employees. She worked at OMB. She was a nuclear regulator. And some of the best passages in this book are her just in full-fledged despair about how garbage it is to be a cog in the machine of the government. And I had not looked for this in this book, but I was so happy to have found it. She says, in my bureaucratic job, I was just part of a larger process, but I wanted to be the process. I wanted to do my own thing. I also need immediate feedback, and there was nothing immediate about government work. And then later she says, I distinctly remember thinking, if I were asked to be the head of the OMB, would I want it? And if not, what was I even working for? I also knew my success would depend on a man choosing me to be the head of the organization. And in 1978, that would never happen. Incredible anti-government 70s feminism from our gal who just kind of on a whim, living in D.C., she had renovated 2 row houses in DuPont that I walk by all the time. I checked out the Einegarten row houses. She was just like, screw it. I'm going to go sell baguettes to rich people. This will be a genuinely more moral existence than working at the OMB. And she was right. So Einegarten, Be Ready When Luck Happens, her first memoir after a long life of writing cookbooks. Very good.
Finding meaning in meaninglessness.
She was like, I can't just Groundhog Day my way through the OMB. This is not the right
I'm
way to live
seeing
my life.
a John Bolton Groundhog Day where it's a regime change thing where it's like we keep knocking over these people, but it just, and then we're back at the beginning again.
I would like the part in the middle of that show where he just shaves his mustache every morning and then it reappears every day.
Her recipes are also amazingly good and easy to follow. I found like she was somebody I was very intimidated by just because her food seemed really good and fancy and hard to do, and it's actually remarkably tasty. And I mean, she's Martha Stewart, her recipes are simple, but they're not really flavorful. Einegarten, the recipes are relatively simple and the food is delicious.
One of her big innovations is if you make a bunch of food and lay it out real nice on a very large platter, your dinner party is going to be banging. And that's just true, actually. Yep. She's correct.
Nick, what did you consume?
So I consumed the first season of a Fox show that also appears on Hulu called The Fixer with Marcus Lemonis, who is a businessman who is originally from Lebanon but ended up in Chicago, and he had a previous show called The Prophet where he would go in and help failing businesses to turn them around. Typically, he would lay down a check for 49 or 50% of the business and say, okay, we're going to do things my way, and then let's see if we can get somewhere. The Fixer is very much like that. It's a fantastic show. It's very much in the tradition of something like Bar Rescue or, Kitchen Nightmares, where it's, it's a rescue show. What is great about Marcus Lemonis, among other things, is that he, in the 90s, I think he ran as a Democrat for Congress in Florida, got nowhere. He is an immigrant, and he talks about that quite a bit and about being an entrepreneur, and in a way, being Lebanese in America and being an entrepreneur is fulfilling an old stereotype. You are a Phoenician deal maker, and you are, you're just always turning things around. But then the other thing at the beginning of The Fixer, in the intro, the standard intro, he says, I believe in capitalism and, hard work, not welfare or handouts. And it's a fantastic short education in how hard it is to make a business successful, but then also what goes into that and why it is beneficial, not just to the people who who own the business, but the people who work there, and especially the people who shop there for their goods and services. Over the weekend, or late last week, he got into a great Twitter scuffle with Gavin Newsom because Lemonis more recently became the head of the revived Bed Bath & Beyond stores. Bed Bath & Beyond went bankrupt in 2023, and they liquidated all their stores. They've come back, and they opened a store in Nashville like a month or so ago. They're going to open a couple more this year and then more next year. And he wrote an open letter to Gavin Newsom saying why he would not cite any of those stores in California. And it created quite a controversy on Twitter, with a lot of people accusing him of just being a bullshit artist because they don't have stores in California now, et cetera. But if you read that letter, I'll put it in the show notes. It's exactly, he is exactly the right type of businessman that we need in America now, where it's not about currying favor with who's in the White House or anything like that. It's about coming up with a good or service that people want at a price they can afford, and then you running your business in a way where you are constantly improving it and making sure you're connected with whatever your limits are, but also whatever clientele is out there.
So my consumption is on Friday afternoon. I went to what I think is the most magical bookstore I've ever been to in my life. And I'm not talking about like magic tricks and stuff. It was this just marvelous place called the Rogers Book Barn in upstate New York, about 2.5 hour drive from New York City. And you have to drive there because it's in the woods. It's a barn in the woods on a crappy little road. And you get there and it looks sort of small. Okay, it's just going to be this one room here. And then I'll just go to the room over the adjoining on the right. And wait, is that a secret passage that goes up there? And there's a stairway. And hey, look, there's a back garden with hammocks and picnic tables and shade. This place was opened by a British woman in 1972, has more than 20,000 book titles. It is a used bookstore in the absolute best sense of the word, like incredibly well done, idiosyncratic tastes. Sections delineated by writing on masking tape and arrows, including I was just walking through the animal section, and here's a whole shelf on wolves. Okay, that's the wolves section. A huge amount of books, and just this oasis of peace and whimsy and plenty. I bought 10 books. I can't remember the last time I bought 10 books at a bookstore. And I'm counting the days of when I can get back there and get some more, because unlike, let's say, the Strand, which is a marvelous bookstore in Manhattan, but you're in the middle of the scrum and you better have a mission there. You're not going to peacefully browse because there are 5 trillion people doing the same thing. Here, there's not very many people are driving through this patch of woods, allegedly near, I think, Hillsdale, New York, but actually not close to it at all. If you look on a map, there's the town of Hudson, where on the Hudson River, where you can go get a mid-century modern used furniture. That's to the left, and to the right you have Great Barrington, where you can go get declarations about COVID in New Hampshire, and then this Rogers Book Barn is in the middle. So it's at Rogers with a D, Rodgers, bookbarn.com to get you information about it. But just such a magical, beautiful experience, and it just reminds you of everything that's great about that a bookstore can give you that a online shopping experience cannot. It just can't.
What books did you buy, Matt? Give us a sample.
Bought a book about Kingston, New York. I bought one about the Erie Canal. Bought some pamphlets about Revolutionary War history that are local. About a couple of baseball books. One that I had, Lords of the Realm. So I'll just have to return that or give it somewhere else. But it's also cheap. I don't think anything costs more than $4 or $5. And some other stuff that I forget.
I hate to break it to you, Matt, but it doesn't sound like this is the type of place you can ever go back to. This is a place where you will try to go back to, and you will be like, wait, what? It was down this road. It was down that road. Maybe it never existed.
The veil will come down. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's
sounds
true.
Amazing, though.
Yeah. No, it's.
Can it be run by an American, though? Did it have to be started by a British person?
I think he can get back if he's pure of heart.
Oh, maybe that's right.
Yeah. I am. Pure of heart.
So that'll be okay. As long as he truly is seeking more Revolutionary War pamphlets.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
You should do a Revolutionary War cookbook, Matt. What did they eat?
Well,
was it all just feathers and macaroni?
There was a lot of suet.
Yeah,
a lot of raccoons.
I forget.
imagine.
Catherine will know, but there's like a name of the bread that they all use because that's basically all they had. It's just their version of cram, with local ingredients. But that's basically it. I was thinking the same thing. Like, let's have a party with like a Revolutionary War menu. Here's the menu. No. It's beer, and spirits,
squab,
and this
kind of stodgy bread. Yeah.
Horrible bread.
Elizabeth Warren came up. You definitely, if you get a chance, it's online. Check out her Pow Wow Chow cookbook that she contributed to when she was not claiming to be Native American at all. That book is online, and it's very funny to see her.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Reason Roundtable podcast. Thank you, Eric Boehm, for sitting in. I believe, don't want to get too out in front of my skis, but I believe that Robbie Suave himself will be in the Eric Boehm chair next week. So you'll have that to look forward to. And again, go and look at our little survey thing and fill it out. Tell us what you'd like to see more of. Usually Nick Gillespie, Elizabeth Warren, cookbook jokes, and things of that nature. Until next week, goodbye.
Girl, I've seen you trying. What you're